Okay, so basically in this session we are going to show that fx has a very interesting property, that is every ideal is generated by a single element. Okay, that's what we are going to look at. So let's give a definition for such a property. Okay, we will say that integral domains which have this property are called as principal ideal domains. Okay, we know that those are called principal ideals, so principal ideal domains. So what is a principal ideal domain? Okay, so or in short we write this as a PID. Okay, so a PID is a integral domain in which every ideal is a principal ideal. Can anyone give me some examples of principal ideal domains? Z. Anything else? Why Q? Any field is going to also be a principal ideal domain, but quite a bad example of a principal ideal domain because there are just two ideals in a field, right? Every field has just two ideals, the zero ideal and the full set. Okay, zero and so all fields are going to be principal ideal domains by that. Fx we need to prove. Okay, so we have one here, and the other one is of course fields, which is not such a nice example, but nevertheless it is a PID. Okay, so these are two examples which we have, and yes, so our intention is to put in a lot more examples here by just proving that fx is a PID. So we are going to prove a very interesting proof, that is, again I am going to write here just fx, which I mean here that f is a field. Whenever I write fx, f is a field, is a PID. We know first of all that since f is a field, f is a integral domain, and hence fx is a integral domain. We are familiar with the fact that fx is an integral domain. Okay, so to show that it's a PID, let's start with an ideal and get an element which is going to be its generator. So let I be an ideal of fx. Okay, now to show that it is a PID, I need to get a generator for this I. Can anyone think of a candidate to be a generator for I? You saw in Z what we did. In Z, we took the least positive integer. Right? That's not possible here, but any ideas? Yeah? Anyone? Generator for I? What's a good candidate? See, take a guess, we'll prove it later. What would be a good guess for a candidate for this? Right, a natural guess would be a polynomial in this of the least degree. Right, a polynomial in this of the least degree. That's the natural candidate. So let's try and see whether this actually works. So of course, if I is the zero ideal, then there is nothing to prove. So if I is the zero ideal, then we know that I is equal to 0 is generated by 0, hence nothing to prove. Hence we assume that, right, if it's the zero ideal, nothing to prove, assume that I is not the zero ideal. Okay, so The natural choice is, by the well ordering principle we can always do this, right? Degrees are non-negative, 0, 1, 2, 3 degrees. So we can take a polynomial of least degree. See, there will be multiple. In fact, there will be multiple polynomials of least degree. We have to take one. Okay, so let P of x be a polynomial of least degree in I. Okay, we are going to show that. Okay. Of course, we know that since this is a polynomial of least degree, the ideal generated by this polynomial, right, the ideal generated by this polynomial has to be a subset of I, right, because this is in I. So any P of x times G of x will also be in I, right? What is this? What is the definition of this set? It's nothing but P of x times G of x, such that G of x is in F, in Fx, right? So what do you mean by an ideal? It's a additive subgroup such that given any element from the ideal and any other element of the ring, the product is back in the ideal. Okay, so that's what we can see. So that this we know that since P of x is in this thing, the smallest ideal containing P will also be in I, will also be a subset of I. Okay, so now take any element of I. So let us say f of x belong to I. What do we use here? Yeah, you use the division algorithm. Take an f of x by division algorithm. We have division algorithm in fx. There exists some q of x and r of x in I, such that what happens? F of x can be written as P of x times q of x plus r of x, where what is r of x? Either r of x is 0 or the degree of r of x is less than the degree of P of x. So what happens if r of x is non-zero? How? Because you can write r of x as f of x minus P of x times q of x. Okay. R of x you can write as f of x minus P of x times q of x. Okay. Both f of x is in I, right? We have taken an f of x from I, and P of x is in I. Since P of x is in I, P of x times q of x is also in I. So therefore, this is going to be in I. So this will tell us that r of x is in I, right? So if r of x is in I, the degree of r of x, either r of x has to be 0 or its degree has to be greater than or equal to P of x. So that leaves only one possibility, that the degree has to be that r of x has to be 0, because we know that the degree is less than P of x, right? Since the degree is anyway not since the degree, that's a mistake which I said. So if we assume that r of x is non-zero, okay, we assume that r of x is non-zero, it's going to be a non-zero element of I, so its degree has to be greater than or equal to the degree of P of x, because P of x has least degree. But this tells us that the degree has to be less than P of x. That's a contradiction. So that will tell us that r of x has to be 0. Okay. So therefore, I'm not writing that argument. You write down that argument on your own. So therefore, r of x will be 0, and therefore this tells me that f of x will be P of x times q of x, which lies inside P of x. So this is the beautiful argument that fx is a PID. Okay, and you should remember that this actually, the only thing that we use here is the division algorithm. Okay, and the reason why I tell you to remember this is because you'll see later on that if we insert this property into any integral domain, it will become a PID on its own. Okay, that's the key property required, that is the division algorithm. We will see that later. So therefore, I has to be P of x. Intuitively, this tells us something. It tells us that ideals of f of x are essentially just the multiples of the polynomial multiples of some polynomial, okay, of the generator. They can be written as multiples of some polynomial. Okay. So let's look at a few exercises. Let's see whether we can go through them one at a time and solve. I am going to just give you a hint to these exercises. I am not proving it. You can do the commutative work on your own. Okay. So one is, if R is a commutative ring, let's see who can give me this idea. If R is a commutative ring, then the characteristic of R is going to be, I am not even saying commutative ring with unity, okay, I am just saying R is a commutative ring, okay, then the characteristic of R is going to be the same as the characteristic of Rx, okay. Does anyone remember what is the characteristic of a ring defined to be? What is it? It's the smallest n such that n times A is 0 for every A in the ring, right? It's the smallest n such that n times A is 0 for every A in the ring, okay. So how do we prove this? There is one side of the inequality that obviously holds. Can anyone see that? Which side? This is less than or equal to this. Why? This is in a way bigger than this, right? Yeah. Yeah. So this is not contained in this, but it's kind of contained in it. There is a 1-1 homomorphism from R to Rx. Can anyone see a 1-1 homomorphism from R to Rx? In fact, I was supposed to do that first. Anyone knows a 1-1 homomorphism from R to Rx? It's not actually contained, yeah, but what is it? You take f of any A to what will I take it to? Yeah. So it is the polynomial with constant term A and zeros everywhere else, which now we have agreed to write as A. Okay, again what is here and here is actually different, but we are giving it the same notation for convenience. Okay, so this is a 1-1 map. Okay, 1-1 homomorphism. How do I know that this is a 1-1 homomorphism? I will need to prove it, right? So what happens to A plus B? What is f of A plus B? It gives you the polynomial, right? Look at the map. What is the image? It is going to go to the polynomial whose constant term is A plus B and everything else is 0. That is exactly the polynomial A, the polynomial with constant term A and everything 0, plus the polynomial with constant term B and everything else 0. Add those two, you will get back that same thing. Okay, so addition works. What about multiplication? F of AB will give us the polynomial with constant term AB and everything else 0. What happens if you take the polynomial constant term A and multiply it to a polynomial with constant term B? You will get the polynomial with constant term AB. Okay, you will need to check that. If you don't know, you will need to check that using the definition. So this is a homomorphism. So this is a 1-1 homomorphism. You can also show that this is 1-1. How do I show that this is 1-1? You can show that the kernel is 0. That's the easiest way. since I've already shown it's a homomorphism, we can simply show that the kernel is 0. Whatever the kernel is, suppose f of a is 0, what does it mean? Yeah, it tells you that f of a is 0, what does it mean? It means that the constant term is, yeah, it will tell you that a is 0 because the constant term is 0, so that's fine. So the kernel of this would be 0, there is no problem in that. So this tells you that this is a 1-1 homomorphism. So you can think of R as if it's embedded in R of x, okay. Embedded means inside, okay, nicely sitting inside there because of the 1-1 homomorphism, okay. So how is this beneficial? Okay, since this happens, if there is some, so if the characteristic of this, of course, one thing we should put away, what happens if the characteristic of R is 0? That means the additive group is you need to that means there is no n such that n times a is 0 for every a in the group. So in that case, you look at the corresponding polynomials also, they will not give you 0. The corresponding constant polynomials also, they will not give you 0. So that is sufficient to tell you that this also will have 0 characteristic. Okay, I hope that's clear. So now we assume that this is positive characteristic. Okay, if this is a positive characteristic of R is n, which is positive. Okay, ask yourself, what does it mean? What does it mean to say the characteristic of R is positive? It means that if you take any element of the ring, add it to itself n times, you get 0. And if you take any other lesser number and do that, you are not going to get 0 for every this thing. Okay, so corresponding to that, this is the minimum number which will be required to add the constant polynomials also to get 0. So obviously, this side of the inequality will hold. You will need, because if you take some k, suppose the characteristic of this is k, what does it mean? That if you add polynomials to themselves k times, you will get 0. Which also means that if you add constant terms to themselves k times, you will get 0. But then the constant polynomials to themselves k times, you are going to get 0, right? But that is equivalent to saying that adding the elements of the ring to themselves k times gives you 0. Okay, so that will tell you that n is less than or equal to k. I don't know whether what I have said is clear. No? Okay, let me just put it out fast. So let us take this to be, I am not going to argue when the characteristic of R is 0, you should be able to do that on your own. So the characteristic of R, you should check the definition, and let's take the characteristic of Rx to be k. Okay, what does this mean? This means that n is the minimum of all k in n such that for every R in R, n times R is 0. This is the definition. And k is the minimum of all, sorry, I can't use, I have used all bad notations. Okay. So S in n such that for all P of x in Rx, k times P of x is 0. Sorry, again I have made a mess. Okay, so I want to say first that n is less than or equal to k. Okay, I want to say that n is less than or equal to k. So to say that n is, yeah, to say that n is less than or equal to k, I am going to say that k lies in this set. That will work, right? I am going to say that k is in this set. That means if I add the elements of R k times, I will always get 0. N is the minimum of this, right? If I can show that k is in this set, then n will be less than or equal to k. If I can show that k is in this set, it means n is less than or equal to. So you take any r in R, right? Corresponding to the, we know that corresponding to the constant polynomial R, k times R has to be 0, right? And if k times R is 0 for the constant polynomial, it will also happen for R. That's the reason why we are mixing the notations. This R, now you have to know which R is it, with the constant polynomial R or the R, but they work the same way. So this is 0. So this happens for every R in R, right? For every R in R, we get k times R is 0. So therefore this means that n is less than or equal to k. That's quite clear. Now what do I need to show this? So the characteristic of R is less than or equal to the characteristic of, yeah. So the next thing is, I have to show that n is here. How do I show that? Add polynomials to themselves n times always gives me 0. I know that when I add elements of the rings to themselves n times, I get 0. You take a polynomial, add it to itself n times, what is happening? Each of the coefficients are going to get added to themselves n times. The coefficients, each of the coefficients, once you add them n times, all of them will come 0. So that will tell me that n is inside this set. So k is less than or equal to n. Okay. So k is less than or equal to n, and that will give us equality. That's a proof. So this is just a simple argument. Nevertheless, it would be a nice way to check whether you know your definition. Okay, there's another interesting one here. See, as we have already said, we can embed R in Rx, right? We have shown how to embed R in Rx, right? What's the way how we do that? Associate it with the constant polynomials. That's the natural way. Okay, the embedding is the association with the constant polynomials. So that's this thing. So if you like, what we have essentially shown is this, that is yeah, so I think that's fine. Let me, yeah. So let us see this exercise. So if R and S are rings, okay, if R and S are rings, and phi from R to S is a ring homomorphism, there is a nice way of extending any ring homomorphism to a ring homomorphism of the corresponding polynomial rings. Can anyone think of it? What do you think your guess is? Yeah? So I want you to be able to define, let's call it as capital phi from Rx to Fx to Sx in a way that it kind of extends the ring homomorphism. That means the constant polynomials of this should go to the corresponding constant polynomials of this. So if R goes to S, the constant or if A goes to B, then the constant polynomial A goes to the constant polynomial B. There's some element A here and some element B here. If phi of A is equal to B, I would want the constant polynomial A to go to the constant polynomial B. What's the natural way? So I'm asking you, what is phi of? It's a natural choice. Summation an x raised to n. I think here we would require I'm not sure whether I might require to have commutativity. Yeah, I might require, I will check as I go. That's fine. Any idea? Okay, where does phi take ans to? Yeah? Phi of an, right? So where you think this should go to? Summation phi of an x raised to n. Okay, that's the natural choice. Okay, these are elements of S, so this is going to be a polynomial in S. How do I know it's a polynomial? That's another question which you should ask. You should ask how do you know this is a polynomial? One, I know that 0 goes to 0, right? So if the highest degree of this is t, if the highest degree of this is t, this will have degree at most t. At most t. It might be less than that. It will have degree at most t, because beyond that all will be zeros, because zeros are going to go to zeros. So that's this thing. So addition is obvious. I will not show you why addition works, because phi of summation a n x raised to n plus summation b n x raised to n will be summation phi of summation a n plus b n x raised to n. That will go to summation phi of a n plus b n x raised to n. But phi of a n plus b n is phi of a n plus phi of b n, and you split it up and you get what you require. Okay, let's look at multiplication. So what is phi of summation a n x raised to n times summation b n x raised to n, right? This would be phi of capital phi. Okay, what is this defined as? Summation, what is the nth term of this? Summation. So let's go n going from 0 to infinity. This will be k going from 0 to n, a k b n minus k x raised to n, right? This is what you get. This is the definition of the product of two polynomials, right? Now by definition, what is this? This is summation n going from 0 to infinity phi of summation n going from 0 to infinity 0 to n a k b n minus k x raised to n. But phi is a homomorphism of these rings, right? Phi is a homomorphism of these rings, so therefore I can take this across the sum, right? I can take this across the sum into the sum, because it's a homomorphism, right? It's a ring homomorphism, so it behaves well with addition and multiplication. And then I can take it the product, right? So this will give me summation n going from 0 to infinity summation k going from 0 to n phi of a k phi of b n minus k x raised to n. Okay, but by definition this is nothing but, by definition this is exactly the polynomial, this is exactly the product of the polynomials phi of a n x raised to n into phi of b n x raised to n. This is exactly the definition of these. By definition, this is the definition of the product of these two polynomials. So this gives me nothing but phi of summation a n x raised to n, okay, and phi of summation b n x raised to n. Okay, so this is a very natural way of extending a homomorphism from rings to the corresponding polynomial rings. Okay, if you have a homomorphism of the rings, There's a natural way of extending it to the homomorphism of this thing. And this is something I will use very often. So, some other things that you can notice here using the similar kind of thing is if R and S are isomorphic, Rx and Sx will also be isomorphic. Can everyone see that? If R and S are isomorphic, Rx and Sx are also isomorphic. Okay, so how do I prove this? Since these are isomorphic, there is an isomorphism, ring isomorphism between them, right? So let phi be the ring isomorphism between R and S. What is the natural choice for the ring isomorphism between Rx and Sx? Yeah? What is the natural choice for the isomorphism between Rx and Sx? What we have done last time? We showed that if you have a homomorphism from R to S, you can extend it to a homomorphism of Rx and Sx. So exactly that homomorphism is what we consider. So you define capital phi from Rx to Sx in what way? Which takes phi of summation an x raised to n to summation phi of an x raised to n. We have already seen that this is a homomorphism. So what we are left to prove? One, that this is 1 1, and two, that it is on 2, right? How do I prove it is 1 1? You have two options. You can actually prove it's 1 1. The second option is to show that the kernel is 0. Okay, so let us show that the kernel is 0. What does it mean by saying? So what happens if phi of summation an x raised to n is the 0 polynomial? What will this mean? This will mean that summation phi of an x raised to n is 0. Right? What does this mean? This is the 0 polynomial means what? Every coefficient is 0. Right? So this will mean that for every n in n, phi of an is 0. What do I want to prove? That this polynomial is 0. How do I prove that this polynomial is 0? By saying that all these ans are 0. Right? Does this mean that all the ans are 0? Why? Because phi is an isomorphism, which means that it's 1 1, which means that its kernel is 0. So therefore this definitely tells us that for every n in n, an is 0, and hence this is 0. So therefore the kernel of this homomorphism is 0, which means that capital phi is a 1 1 map. How do I show it's onto? How do I show that this is onto? You start with some polynomial over here, say summation bn x raised to n, right? Since bn's are elements of S, they will have corresponding pre-images, say an. Look at the image of an, what you will get is exactly summation bn. That's the natural choice. Okay, so if R and S are isomorphic, obviously you expect that the polynomial rings will be isomorphic. That's this thing. So we have got something like this, that is, if you have a homomorphism between R and S, we know that this Rx, this kind of sits over this, right? Sx, there's a natural way of defining this which preserves this homomorphism. This is the capital phi which we have got. The restriction of this to R is actually phi. Okay, the restriction of this, the restriction of this map to R actually is small phi. Okay, that's the natural choice. Okay, just for fun, we know all ideals in fx, right? So in the next sections we'll be looking at two things. One is talking about some prime type elements in fx, primes in fx, whatever it means we will discuss later. Yeah, so we will be talking about what these primes are, and of course you also want to understand how the behavior of these primes give us, what do they mean about the ideals generated by these. So which ideals are maximal and prime ideals. Okay, so let's at least look at one maximal ideal. So if just for fun, this is, we will look at this later also. If f is a field, can you give me a maximal ideal in fx? If x is a field, anyone knows? Now we know that all ideals are principal ideals, right? All ideals are principal ideals. Can anyone give me a maximal ideal in fx? Yes? Okay, so I'll give you one maximal ideal. If I give you one, then you should at least give me cardinality of f number of ideals. Anyway, we will see that later. So if f is a field, then this is a maximal ideal of fx. So this is another way for you to actually be able to recollect the definition of a maximal ideal. Okay, what is a maximal ideal? What do you mean by a maximal ideal? Yeah, no ideal sits between it and the entire ring, right? That's the definition of a maximal ideal. A maximal ideal is an ideal such that no ideal sits between it and the entire ring. That's what you mean by a maximal ideal. So suppose I is an ideal of fx such that I sits between x and fx. What do we need to prove? Yeah? What do we need to prove here? I is equal to fx or I is equal to the ideal generated by x. Okay, this is what we would need to prove. Now, since we have already proved that fx is a PID, we know that this is going to be generated by some polynomial. Okay, since fx is a PID, we know that there exists some p of x in fx such that I is generated by p of x. So, can anyone tell me how I can do this? So, a nice way is to think of this in terms of multiples. Okay, that's the way you can always, these you can think of as multiples of x, just like in Zn, the multiples of n are nz. So here these are kind of multiples of x. Okay, these are multiples of p of x. Okay, that's how you should intuitively think of it. Now x is a multiple of p of x. X is a multiple of p of x, right? X belongs to that. So x is a multiple of p of x. What can p of x be? That's the natural way of thinking of it. X is a multiple of p of x, isn't it? X belongs to I. That means you can write x as some p of x times g of x. So x is a multiple of p of x. What are the possibilities for p of x? Okay, let me put it more the same. What can you say about the degree of p of x? If x is a multiple of p of x, what can you say about the degree of p of x? It will be, yeah, or it will be either 1 or, not necessarily 1, it could be 1 or 0, right? By this thing, that's natural to see. So since x belongs to I, there exists some g of x in fx such that you can write your x as p of x times g of x. Okay, obviously none of these are 0, because if this was 0 then x would be 0. That is a ridiculous assumption. So therefore the degree of x, which is 1, degree of x is 1, is the degree of p of x plus the degree of g of x. We know this, right? Which means that either the degree of p of x, therefore the degree of p of x should be less than or equal to 1. Okay, p of x cannot be 0, so therefore the degree of p of x will either be 0 or 1. What happens if the degree of p of x is 0? What happens if the degree of p of x is 0? It will be a constant polynomial. If the degree of p of x is 0, it's going to be a constant polynomial. Will it be a unit? Are all constant polynomials in fx units? What do you need to multiply it to? Yeah, so if it's the constant polynomial a, you need to multiply it to the constant polynomial a inverse, right? So we know that all constant polynomials are units, right? So if the degree of p of x is 0, then it is a unit. What does that tell us about I? It should be the entire ring, right? If the degree of p of x is 0, it will tell us that this is I, so it should be the entire ring. Oh, sorry, this is a unit, and therefore this has to be the entire ring. Okay, ideals generated by units are the entire ring. What happens if the degree of p of x is 1? If the degree of p of x is 1, that tells us that g of x is going to be, the degree of g of x should be 0, right? That means g of x is a constant polynomial. So x is p of x times g of x. P of x is a polynomial of degree 1. So you can write p of x as some ax plus b times g of x, you can write as say some c, because it's a constant polynomial. So 1 is equal to, sorry, x is equal to a of x, acx plus bc, right? What does that tell us about bc? It should be 0, right? That tells us that bc should be 0, but c cannot be 0 because g of x is not the 0 polynomial, right? So therefore necessarily b should be 0. Okay, and if b is 0, that means P of x becomes exactly Ax, right? So P of x is going to be exactly Ax. But what is the ideal generated by Ax? The ideal generated by Ax is exactly going to be the same as the ideal generated by x, right? That's what you need to do. Okay, so let's be a little fast and complete that. So if the degree of P of x is equal to 0, then P of x is a constant polynomial, which means that, okay, P of x is a unit in fx. By the way, what are the units in fx? In fx, what are the units? In fx, what are the units? All constant polynomials. All constant polynomials are units. These are the only units, right? Because if you take a polynomial of degree greater than 0, right? If it has an inverse, if you assume that it has an inverse, say P of x has an inverse, that means P of x times g of x should be 1. But that doesn't make sense in terms of the degree, because the degree of the left hand side will be greater than the degree of P of x, and the degree on the right hand side will be 0. Right? If a polynomial of degree greater than 0 is a unit, that means P of x times g of x is 1, but the degree on the left hand side will be greater than, right? It's going to be greater than 1, because the degree of P of x times g of x is the degree of P of x plus the degree of g of x. But the degree on the right hand side is 0. That doesn't make sense. So with this we know that all units are polynomials of degree 0. Now all you need to show is that every polynomial of degree 0 is a unit. So you know what is the inverse. The inverse is exactly, take the inverse in the ring and multiply it to it, just in terms of the constant polynomials. That's the problem in putting it. Okay, so P of x is a unit in fx. So what happens if the degree of P of x is 1? In this case, so this is 1, then cancelling out on both sides, you will get degree of g of x is 0, which means that g of x is a constant polynomial. Let us say that g of x is equal to some c, okay, constant polynomial c. That means the constant term is c, everything else is 0, okay. And let us take P of x, because P of x is of degree 1, right? So let's say it's the coefficient of x is a, and the constant coefficient is b, and everything else is 0, okay. So therefore what will happen to P of x times g of x? Okay, this will be exactly acx plus bc, okay. So therefore what we have here is x is equal to acx plus bc, which means that 1 is equal to ac and 0 is equal to bc, okay. It is not possible that c is 0. Why it's not possible that c is 0? Because then g would be 0. G cannot be 0, because if g was 0, you'll get a lot of different contradictions. If g is 0, then x would be 0. That's not possible. So c cannot be 0. So since c is not 0, b has to be 0, right? So bc is equal to 0 will mean that b is 0 as c is not equal to 0. Why is c not 0, as I said? Because g cannot be 0, okay. So therefore so b is 0. So therefore what happens is P of x is now ax, okay. P of x is ax, and I need to now show, okay, what I need to show is that x is equal to ax. This is what I need to show, okay. I will tell you how to do it fast, but I am not going to prove this. This is too trivial. Take an element from here, right? What does elements from here look like? X times f of x, right? How do I write it as ax times something? X times f of x. I want to write it as an element of this. What do elements from here look like? Ax times g of x. So how am I going to write it like that? A times A inverse, sorry, I'm making a mistake. Okay, we'll do it like that, right? Ax times A inverse f of x, which is now an element from here. So therefore this element is here. Now you take an element from there, prove that here. How you'll do it? Elements of here look like Ax g of x. Push the A with the g of x, so you'll get x times A g of x, which is here. Okay, so very easy, you can show that this equality holds. So what we have proved? We have proved that either I is this or I is that. Okay, that was a fun exercise. Yeah, there's another interesting one here. After that we will stop. Let's see, this would try to check whether you have properly understood your cosets. So let us see how we can do this. So let f of x and g of x belong to f of x. Let me go with p of x also. Okay, if you have f, g and p in fx such that the degrees of f of x and g of x are both less than p of x. And if I know that these two cosets are the same, okay, which two cosets? The cosets f of x plus p of x. This is an additive subgroup, right? It's an ideal, it's an additive subgroup. If I know that these two are equal, what can I say about g of x and f of x? What can I say about g of x and f of x? Okay, then interestingly, f of x will be equal to g of x. Okay, and why? It's quite easy to see why. What do you mean by saying that these two cosets are equal? It means that f of x minus g of x belongs to the subgroup, that is p of x. Okay, so it's not very difficult, but in any case, so we have f of x minus g of x is in p of x. Okay, yeah, but the degrees of f of x and p of x the degrees of f of x and g of x are both less than p of x. Therefore, the degree of f of x minus g of x is also going to be less than the degree of p of x. But what do you mean by saying that this is in this set? It means that this is equal to some p of x times h of x. Right? What can that h be? If that h is non-zero, look at the degree on the left hand side and the degree on the right hand side. Okay, so this will mean that there exists some h of x in fx such that f of x minus g of x is nothing but p of x times h of x. Okay, if if h of x is non-zero, okay, if h of x is non-zero, what happens to the degree of f of x minus g of x? The degree of so if h of x is non-zero, then the degree of because this is also non-zero, p of x is non-zero. Have I said that? Yeah, I'm assuming here that p of x is non-zero. So p of x times h of x, this is strictly greater than the degree of p of x, right? So in any case, if this is non-zero, then this is non-zero, which means that this is non-zero. But what is the degree of this? It has to be less than the degree of p of x. This is in fact greater than or equal to. This is strictly less than the degree of p of x. That's a contradiction, which means that the h of x has to be 0. Okay, since h of x has to be 0, it means that f of x has to be equal to g of x. With this, you can actually do something nice with it. Anyway, so we will stop here. Look at the reducibility test next time.